A pleasant morning to everybody. Today is the third and last day of the conference. This will be half day only, but still full packed. We have two more plenary sessions and a roundtable discussion called Ideas, where everybody will get to participate. In the meantime, to see what transpired yesterday, please watch this APP.
Innovation, and transformation. Now, Star burns ever brighter. Driven by the pursuit of innovations and transformations in STEM education to help everyone move forward in a post-pandemic world. Star.
Wow, what a fruitful and full day two of the conference. Let us now continue with the sixth plenary session. To moderate this session, I would like to turn over the floor to Mr. Jun Karen Caparoso of Mindanao State University, Iligan Institute of Technology.
Thank you, Sir Bern. As mentioned in one of the plenary talks yesterday, the primary challenge in implementing blended learning is how to sustain student engagement, making them active participants in the process. And one of the strategies identified is the gamification of lessons, gamifying a non-game environment such as the classroom. I am Jun Karen Caparoso of Mindanao State University, Iligan Institute of Technology, and I will be your moderator for this plenary session. Our sixth plenary speaker is a faculty member of the Educational Technology area of the College of Education, University of the Philippines, Diliman. As a learning system and instructional designer, he has worked with both government and private institutions in various projects, particularly those involving learning, media, and technology. His lifelong passion for learning and gaming is evident in his instruction, research, and extension works, where he specializes in game-based learning and gamification of learning, the topic that he will passionately share to us this morning. So friends, fellow teachers and educators, please help me welcome with a virtual applause Assistant Professor John Paul Maligalig. Sir?
Hello, good morning. Thank you, sir. A fellow June. Okay, good morning, everyone. I saw what you've been doing for the last couple of days, and it's very exciting. I hope to live up to the expectations of everyone. So let's see. Ooh, it's cut off. Give me a second. Yan. Okay. Okay, so welcome. I'm here to talk about gamification. I hope the image is readable for everyone, or is it inverted? Feedback from the plenary. Is it readable? Okay lang. Go ahead,
Yes,
chat.
sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir, it
okay.
is.
Sige. Thank you. Okay. So, yeah. You talked about blended learning and probably hybrid learning as well. So, one of the strategies mentioned really is gamification. Now, it was written also in a white paper by UNESCO when the pandemic started, that after a year of introducing technology into the classrooms, into the home classrooms of everyone, gamification would be helpful in sustaining motivation and interest and engagement amongst our learners. So I'm here to talk about it now, but I do have to tell you, this isn't actually just about gamification. It's just a part of a bigger puzzle that when you put it all together, maybe you can come up with something useful in your classroom. So here we are. We're teachers, and this is the typical perception we have of games. So our learners are distracted by games, okay? And of course, me being a gamer as well, it's sort of confusing for me. I can see, I learn from my games, see, and it's part of my research. So it's strange to me that people who don't really know about games, video games, board games, card games, even the sports that we play, those who don't really play games don't seem to understand that the underlying mechanism for gameplay is actually learning. So let's have a little refresher, a little quiz for everyone, okay? So these are the things that we say about our learners now, okay? So they think school is not for them. They would rather be at home playing games. Okay, they can't work independently. They always seem to need attention. Teacher, please help me. Okay, I don't know how to do this, and they'll just watch as you show them, and then okay, you do it now. Nothing happens, di ba? They don't read or watch the references we give online. Okay, they didn't read them before, and they don't watch them now. So what's up? And some of our learners even quit before they start. Now, when they start playing games, this is what happens. Okay, our learners, the game players, suddenly feel like they own the games. Okay, this is a significant part of their life, and they're not willing to let it go. I'm good at this. Okay, they always want to be left alone. Please, I'm playing a game. Mommy later na lang. Okay, they shoo adults away. They always seem to know more about the game than they do other things in life, such as the news, or even I asked you to fix your room. What happened? I don't know. Okay. Oh, I have props. I forgot props. I don't know. Okay. And then lastly, they don't seem to want to quit. They've been playing for 3 hours already. They're not hungry. They're not thirsty. They don't seem to have any bodily functions. They don't need to go to the bathroom. And their interest is right there on the screen. Okay. Or in the case of a board game, probably on the tabletop. Now, let's take a look at this. Okay. The problems we find on the left for our learners in school, okay, are addressed by the things that we observe them doing when they're playing on the right. It's a one-to-one correspondence. Okay. So you might want to say that, okay, games motivate. Okay. Motivate to keep on playing. Okay. School, somehow, it's not being implemented well. It's demotivating. So what's happening here? What's going on? Okay. So there's a lot of underlying psychology behind it, but I want to point out that in my how many years already, I started using games as learning materials in 2008. So it's been a couple of years. Okay, it's been more than 10. And these are some of the activities we've been doing in our classes before. And I still use games now. And some of the practices that I'll be sharing with you are actually practices that I do for my classes today. Now, when we start thinking about, okay, what's demotivating about school? What's motivating about games? You start to wonder, what is it about games that really helps students to keep a focus? Okay, our young learners are really into games, not much into school. They may find school fun for a while, but not always. Okay. Now, because of that, we have what we call a movement called game-based learning. Okay, game-based education, and we're starting to use games for facilitating learning in our learners. Okay, so this was taken a few years ago from the website of Quest to Learn. It's a school in New York City in the US, and this is their slogan: what if we could build a school where students are excited about learning, solving problems, and facing complex challenges? They use games and game design. They ask their students to design games to teach a particular concept, with the assumption that if you can't teach something, you don't really know much about it. So they design games around their lessons. It's not just the teachers who are doing this. The students also make games, and the teachers play with them. Okay. Now, beside mainstream education in many parts of the world, game-based education is really practiced. It's not much of a thing here in the Philippines. I just know a couple of people who do the same things I do, but maybe you could add to our numbers. Now, we have higher engagement of learners, and participation is higher in class in Quest to Learn. Now, the assumption here is that with increased participation, with the increased engagement, of course, they're there, they're present in the moment. There is a bigger possibility of them learning more, okay, as evidenced by the statistics that you see on your screen right now. So they perform better in standardized tests. Now, of course, it's not just in basic education. We also have game-based education in higher ed. So these are a couple of the schools or colleges in the US who actually use games, or they use gamification in their classes. So some of the names may be familiar to you. Some of these universities also have colleges of education. And in those colleges of education are the researchers who are into game-based learning. So one of my email acquaintances before, Dr. Squire, used to teach in Wisconsin-Madison. He's now in a different university. There are a couple of people I've emailed from MSU, Michigan State. So it's really all around. And I can bet you that this, when it was taken in 2012, has now increased, okay? Now, how do games really teach us? That's a different talk. That deserves a talk all on its own. And we could probably talk about that for hours. But let's summarize it a bit, okay? James Paul Gee once argued that there's a lot to be learned about instructional design from studying contemporary computer games. If you look at a computer game now, what's the first thing that a game asks you to do? It gives you what we call in game parlance a tutorial, okay? And it sounds just like its learning counterpart. It teaches you how the controls work in a game, how the different mechanics work. If Mario leaps into the air and he lands on a particular enemy, such as a Goomba, okay, he flattens it, so he gets some points for that. Okay, when he leaps into a block with a question mark on it, suddenly an item pops out, which gives him superhuman powers. Okay, so all of these things are taught in tutorial levels in a game, and the skills learned in these tutorial levels are implemented in, say, what we call end boss battles. The players are faced with challenges facing different enemies, where you have to use the different skills you learned in the tutorials to beat this particular enemy. And then you go to another level, where it's another set of skills that you learn, another set of challenges you overcome, until at the end of the game, you're so good at it. It's very, very difficult to watch somebody who's mastered a particular game and understand everything that's happening, because modern games right now, really, they increase the challenge tenfold. Okay, you start out simple. Suddenly, everything you see on the screen is just lights, because that's everything that's happening. But still, a player is still in there and understands everything, able to interpret all that stimuli and act accordingly. That kind of mastery, that kind of focus, shouldn't we have that in our classes? Shouldn't our learners also have that? So one of the strategies, really, as evidenced by the boom of game-based education in other countries, is to implement learning systems with either games in them, or turning learning systems or parts of them into games. Now, we'll have a couple of definitions because we're academics in here. So unfortunately for us, we have to define. Sorry po. So game-based education, we can separate into two halves, no? Ludopedagogy is game-based teaching. So we use games as educational media. And in ludoandragogy, okay, a term I coined in 2012, it's really game-based learning. The games themselves teach our learners, okay? With the proper supervision, this is possible. It may be difficult at the basic education level, but when you need higher order learning, probably in higher education, di ba? Match sila. It really works, okay? And I have research to show for that particular fact, okay? So here, just a couple of diagrams, okay? So in games for teaching, okay, learning occurs when the game and the content of your lesson intersect, all right? But in game-based learning, okay, the content and the learner are immersed in a learning system, the game itself, okay? So different orientations. One is where the game teaches, okay? The teacher facilitates, is the game master, is the referee, okay? Making sure all the rules are followed and making sure that when there's a question about a particular concept that you need to teach, you are there, okay? In this one, the teacher himself, herself uses games to teach, okay? So different paradigms. Now, we have to also think about what kind of engagement, okay, are we expecting? What kind of immersion should we have for a game? And we have to balance that with the content of the lesson. Sometimes a game, shown here, is too exciting that the content is forgotten. Okay, it becomes abstracted. It's not really clear, and it becomes a side topic where we want it to be the central idea of the activity. So what we want is an appropriate blend of the importance of the content, right amount of concreteness with the engagement. Okay, it shouldn't be too exciting that the content is forgotten, but it shouldn't be too realistic that it's a simulation. And if it's just like in the real world, why not do it in the real world? Okay, so some people ask me, why do you play football games on your computer? You're a football player. Why don't you play outside? Okay, the answer right now is I can't. we have a pandemic, so these sports aren't allowed really. So that's a safe way to practice what I normally enjoy. All right. So this is what we have: the ideal blend of content and immersion, a game for learning. Now let's talk about gamification, which is in the title of this particular talk. Okay. Gamification is a process of using game thinking and mechanics to engage audiences and solve problems. Okay. That's Gabe Zigerman talking. Okay. And gamification is already mainstream, not in education. Okay. If you were one of the few, that's wishful thinking. If you're one of the multitude, yan, of the people who actually were on their phones waiting for 11:11 to happen with your virtual wallets ready to make purchases, you already are practicing gamification. You're a subject of it, of these particular platforms, of these online stores. Why? You earn bonus points. You have mini games that actually earn you discounts. Okay, you have rewards where you are given cash back. All of these are gamification mechanics. Okay, they're giving you rewards for performing particular behaviors that they want you to perform. In this case, purchasing. Okay, just like in a game where you learn skills and you are rewarded for the skills with advancement, with points. So do you earn points? So do you earn discounts if you keep on purchasing? Okay, that's gamification. So for those of you who feel na, okay, I'm a victim of another monthly sale, it's always with with the same date of the month, no? Okay, 1/1, 2/2, 3/3, 11/11. Okay. If you're feeling bad that you can't resist it, don't feel as bad because that's what gamification does. It rewards the behavior. Okay. So if you're addicted to online shopping, this is part of the reason. Okay. Now, note, it can be addicting. Okay. Now, do you say the same thing about learning in your classrooms? It can be addicting. Okay. That's why we use gamification. Okay. So, for example, I forgot which university this is in Texas. Okay. They have what they call a professional development game. Okay. They gamify this. Okay. So they have badges which they award to their students for doing certain behaviors. So if you can't read it, I'll read it for you. Grandmaster, 2,000 points or more is the pinnacle of professional readiness. Grandmasters have extensive experience. Why is it apostrophe S? In engaging with industry, have demonstrated extensive leadership and communication skills, and are likely to take on leadership roles in the future. Okay. Master, 1,500 points or more. The Master of Professional Achievement. Masters have gone above and beyond all the basic requirements and excelled in every category of professional development, career knowledge, networking, and are expected to be stars in their careers, and so on. The lowest rank is apprentice. You have just started investing in your professional career early. Now, look at this. They're actually rewarding good behavior, good scholastic behavior within the university. Paano? Okay? Professional readiness. It could be submitting early, meeting your deadlines. It could be coming to class on time. Okay? Avoiding tardiness, avoiding absences. Okay? It could be good interactions with your peers, with your fellow learners. It could be respecting your faculty, giving them the proper respect they are due. So these are all the things that they could reward in a system like this. Okay, you could do something like this in your class. However, this is more of a systemic thing. That's why when we started this talk, I mentioned that gamification is just one piece of a bigger puzzle that we may have to learn to be able to implement something like these things in our classes. Gamification is a systemic thing. Until your school, your division, your central office wants gamification in your schools, in your class, nothing will happen. Why? Because we have a standardized education system. Everything is mandated from top down. So we can't change much. Okay? We can't do gamification because you're changing the entire system. Okay? If you're treating something like a game, it should be fair for everyone. Just like in a class, but more so in a game. Because we have players who collaborate and we have players who compete. So we have to make both styles of play meaningful for our learners. Okay? And by play, I mean how they interact in class. Suddenly, if you gamify, there is an element of play in your class. Now, note, the idea behind game-based learning, gamification, and what I'm going to talk about next, it's not really fun. Okay? The games can be fun, but learning can also be fun. That's what we want, di ba? Learning is actually fun. It's just that with the systems that we have in place, fun takes really a far backseat. It's in row 4, where the content is in row 1. Okay? So what we do is we make learning fun again. We make it less about the content and more about learning. Okay? Content is still important, pero not maybe in the first row. Learning is in the first, di ba? And I'm not so familiar with modern classrooms now. It used to be just 4 rows in my day. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've already talked about. So game-based learning, game-based education. So that's games as learning activities and evaluation. Yes, I have games where they stand for exams. We have a gamification of learning. So what we just talked about. So sorry about this. Game systems and mechanics to support learning. And here's what we suggest. Something in the middle, okay? And this is what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this talk. Some tips on how to do this. This is Barry Fishman's concept of gameful learning, okay? So it's somewhere in the middle, if you were to ask me, in the middle of the continuum. The best aspects of gaming are taken and applied to the learning environment with a high priority for engagement. That sounds like something that we need in our classes now. Diba? Kasi we have Zoom calls or Google Meets with our class. Okay? And nobody is really into it. They're just nodding their heads, pretending to take notes. Okay? Aminin na natin, that happens. Okay? So what we want is engagement. And we're going to use some concepts of gamification and a little bit of game-based learning to help us get this engagement. Okay, so if you were to think about it, gameful learning is a combination of game thinking and game design. So suddenly you're not just designing lessons, you're not just designing learning, you're also designing a game. Okay, and some motivation theories. I'm not going to talk about the motivation theories here right now. It's not really my place. I'm just a psychology student. But some of the theories are flow. Okay, we have resilience. Okay, that's grit. Okay, and we also have self-motivation in itself. The bigger theory, okay, the umbrella theory of self-motivation. So, how do we design gameful learning experiences? Let's talk about the elements of games. So, what do we design? We talk about how to design them. Okay, what do we use? Okay, and the different tools. Okay, how do we teach gameful learning lessons? These are just a couple of examples for the tools, but I do suggest that you find your own. Okay, and it's best to use technologies and tools that you already know. Okay, you're learning gameful learning techniques already to add to your learning load by learning a new tool. Not right now, maybe in the future when you have gameful learning already down. Okay, so according to Jesse Shell, the elements of games, mechanics, these are the rules and procedures of your class, of your game. Next is the story. So what is the goal? What is your content? Everything that is narrative, okay? So that includes yung mismong lesson ninyo, okay? That includes your learning outcomes, your objectives. Of course, that's your MELCs, okay? Your learning competencies, okay? And also, really, how you put things together, okay? So, paano natin siya kino-combine? We also have aesthetics, okay? So, this is the sensory and emotional stimuli. In our particular case, the aesthetics are brought through the tools that we have. So, that's the technology, okay? So, how you teach really gives a sense of something, of feelings to your students, all right? So, using the tools that we have, you can actually change their moods. Okay, you have no idea how simple a thing as just when you want to emphasize something, turning off your presentation just gives you that emphasis, diba? You're just looking at me. If you want to say something important, if you want to crack a joke and make yourself look silly just to be an icebreaker, diba? A human icebreaker, then go ahead. Ganyan. Pero when it comes to your lesson again and what you're showing as visuals is important, then pop it back up. Okay? So, here's I proposed game for learning for you. Okay? Something of a template, if you will. Okay? So, for your mechanics, these are your policies. Okay? What are the policies that we need to change? One of the things that we have problems with is attendance. Really, students coming to class, okay? Instead of penalizing them for missing class, why don't we reward them for coming? Okay? It looks like the same thing, di ba? Pero it's a whole different ball game when it's the psychology involved. What would you rather have? Something given to you or something taken away, di ba? Even our grades, our grading systems are like that. When you think about it, our grading systems are to 100%. And every time a student submits something and makes a mistake, we're actually not adding the points. We're actually taking points away. Okay? Why not just give them points, let them add it up so that they can reach the 100? And while they're earning the points, while they're accumulating all their points, that actually motivates them to earn more. Diba? Sabi nga, but wait, there's more. Okay? We tend to be hoarders of academic points, diba? So, for story, instead of just the lessons in your textbooks, why don't you think of narratives that are relatable for your students? If you come from a particular community where fisheries is a thing, why not have your lessons about fisheries yet still linked? Okay? Why, if you're talking about poetry, why not poetry from the sea, kumbaga, or about the sea? Okay? Something like that. It's more relatable to them. Okay? I come from a particularly landlocked region, okay? That is agricultural but is slowly becoming commercialized, okay? So we have farms there, just not so many anymore, okay? So some of the people that we help teach are actually out of school farmers or their families, okay? So everything we come in with, for example, if you're introducing a technology, that particular technology has to be relatable, has to have some application, some meaning to them, okay? So that they will be able to appreciate it and adopt it. That's the same with our learners, whatever their age. Aesthetics, okay? Let's make our assets, our teaching learning materials readily available, okay? And if possible, they're actually attractive, diba? That's what aesthetics are, diba? So when you think about it, we have a lot of references, we have a lot of materials that we have already accumulated in all our years of teaching. Now, what you need now are digital materials which are readily available for your students to access, okay? The advantage of integrating these materials properly into your classes cannot be denied. You can actually save some teaching time if the materials that you're using are actually self-paced, okay? And I'm not talking about our modular learning. Modules are different, okay? By design, that has to be that the entire system is modular. You can have modular learning in a system that isn't designed to be modular, okay? That's like saying you're using a tabo for kape. That doesn't make sense, okay? So the materials that you choose should already be interactive, okay? And you can come in as a teacher as sort of a referee, okay? How are you doing? What's happening? Oh, that's nice. How did you do that? Okay? How are you doing? You haven't started yet? O sige, let me show you how to start. Tapos I'll observe you, okay? That's how we do it. Now, technology. Of course, we are teachers. We cannot claim to have a multitude of funding sources, okay? But there are a lot of free and familiar apps and resources that are available to us. The chief of them is actually imagination. We can imagine things, but unfortunately, as adults, our our imagination powers are not as strong as those of our little words. Okay, the younger set. Okay, they have more imaginative minds. They're still that creative by nature. Okay, so why not plant seeds that would tend to work on that creativeness? Okay, instead of being very specific about a particular character in a story. Okay, Just show them or just give them a couple of details, and their minds will fill in the gaps. Okay, that's the magic of using imagination. Okay, and that's what we forget as adults, because we want things to be exact, we want things to be quick. We don't have time to learn all of these things. Show me now. Okay, what does an isosceles triangle look like? Okay, but if you have a story, for this is for younger for younger learners, you have a story about three lines meeting together, and everything two of the lines want to really have more, and but that's the isosceles, diba? If I remember my geometry correctly. Okay, two sides are longer, one side is shorter. Okay, so ganon. Okay, see, I'm even having a more difficult time with it because I'm not that imaginative anymore. But you younger teachers, you can possibly do that pa. And of course, your learners, the mind of the younger set. Okay, so here's your first gameful learning task. What you do is you personalize learning. Okay, you've heard about personalized learning, self-paced learning for so long, yet it's hard to practice. You know why? Because we're thinking like teachers. Let's think like students, okay? As a student, what do you want? I want to do what I want to do, okay? Okay, so if that's the case, I'm going to give you 3 different options on how to perform this particular activity. You can either write an essay, you can sing a song that is an original composition, or you could draw a portrait, okay? 3 different things. The important thing is you have rubrics for that. And let them choose what they want to do. You might be asking, Sir JP, that's going to be a little hard to check 3 different things from the students. What you could do is you can actually have them vote. Okay, we have 3 options. Which ones do you want? Okay, then it's their choice as a class. Okay, the preferable one, of course, and this is easier because I teach in higher ed. So we have fewer students in a class. So what I do is I have my system ready for all 3 types of requirement. Okay. What you could also consider is these options should reflect your students, your learners' particular interests. So in a class, you might have singers, you might have dancers, you might have visual artists, you might have gamers, okay? So you might want to consider their particular interests so that when they choose, this is something I'm good at, this is mine. Remember from the earlier one, they own the game. If you show them that you can do this as a requirement and you're really good at it, you own it. And if you own it, there is really no excuse for them not to do it. And they will. If they enjoy something, they will do it. I once had a student in college who was really tardy in his classes, absent in most of them, did not submit anything. But when it came to our class, he was coming to class. He was doing all the activities. Why? I had him teach once his classmates skateboarding as a presentation on the presentation. The presentation was the topic. Okay, how to do a presentation. Okay, and I asked him, okay, you show your classmates how to do a presentation, but do you present also? What, sir? As an example, you do a sample presentation on skateboarding. I understand you're a skateboarder. Yes, sir. Okay, so show us a few moves, and he did, and he's now a teacher. Okay, task 2. Design collaborative formative assessments. The value of formative assessments is increased in a system such as ours in remote learning. Why? Because really, we as teachers are up in arms against professional cheating. Diba? Ask somebody to do it for pay. Ask the parents to do it. Okay? Ask ate, ask pinsan who is a college student to do the calculus for a high school student. Okay? We don't want that. Pero did we also think that maybe it's because these are summative assessments? We grade them. Okay? Traditionally, formative assessments are not graded. Did you know that? Quizzes were envisioned as formative assessments, but they were not graded. They were a way for teachers to figure out, okay, what am I teaching right and what am I teaching wrong? Originally, it was for us, and now it's for them. Okay, I know because I was a victim of all these surprise quizzes before. Okay, and I still give surprise quizzes. I announce them. Okay, I announce there's going to be a surprise quiz tomorrow, and my students will be, sir, then it's not a surprise. Okay, what's the surprise? I'm not going to tell you what it's about. Pero it's formative. Okay, it's not graded for me. Okay, sa inyo, you will have graded quizzes. Pero also throw around a quiz or two na hindi graded. Okay? So design collaborative formative assessments. You can think beyond quizzes now. What you can ask them to do is project planning. Okay? Project-based. So ask your learners to make a design plan. What project are you doing? I'm going to make a diorama. Okay? So how are you going to do that? Ask them. Okay? Put it in writing. Oh. May process siya. Okay? Now, okay, sige, that's your plan. Go. Do it. Allow your learners to collaborate with their classmates and their household members. Sir, bawal yan. Dapat yung estudyante yung gagawa. Formative yan. Formative yan. Okay? This is their tutorial level. Okay? Bago ka mag-summative, may tutorial ka muna. Meron kang formative muna. Okay? And when you ask them to collaborate with these people, you must also tell them, you should tell me kanino ka humingi ng tulong. Where did you ask for help? Okay? Who do you ask help from? And ask them to list it down. Those of you in high school will immediately recognize the importance of this. It's not plagiarism if you cite your sources. Diba? Okay? So, at a young age, you're teaching them, it's okay to ask for help. As long as you tell me that you asked for help and you list down who did you ask help from. Okay? And if you're already up in arms, sir, hindi po pwede yan. Formative. It's formative. Okay? Task 3. Design a simple point system for timely, relevant learner feedback. This is what I was talking about. In our traditional grading systems, we take points away. Okay? Now, we ask them to earn points and to accumulate them. So here's what you can do. You don't have to change the entire school system for this. You just change how you report these points to your class. Turn your percentages and your weights into points. So if it's 100 points, 100%, okay? So probably 20% quizzes, 30% exams, diba? 25% project, those weights, okay? Turn them into points. What I do is simply multiply it so that my perfect score is 1,000. 1,000 points, okay? And it's easy to look for the weights. If it's 30%, what's 30% of 1,000? 300, okay? So suddenly, your students are able to visualize, okay, I need 300 points for the exam if I'm going to earn that. It's not a weight, okay? What's the difference? Students, when you have many quizzes, say 15 quizzes, marami yun, okay? 15 quizzes, that's all, each is worth 10 points, okay? Pero it's just, what, 10, 15% of your grade? What they're going to see is all the points they earned is still going to be weighed 15%. But if you already said, okay, all quizzes, 150 points, first quiz, 20, second quiz, 15, third quiz, 30, what they will see actually is a progression. Even if they fail in a particular quiz, they will still earn points. That's the difference. You know how demoralizing a failing grade is? Out of 20, I got 7. That's pretty sad. But when you think about it, it's still 7 points. I had 20 points before. I now have 27. Okay? I have to earn more points. I have to do better in the next quiz. That's the difference. Okay. Show their progress by leveling up. What I do personally, and I'm going to show you, is I have levels. This would be familiar to you if you play what we call role-playing games, okay? Where your characters grow with time. They become better at what they do. Fighting, creating magic, healing people, all right? You get better with time. How do they do it? You earn points for every task that you do. Say I defeat a monster, I earn 20 experience points. What we are doing right now for this particular task is we're turning your points in class into experience points. They're earning them. So for the first level, say you can earn, for the second level, you earn 100 points. The first level is 0. I don't have any points. Okay, I'm level 1. Level 2, I've already earned 105. Oh, okay, I'm level 2 now. What happens? I have to get to level 3. Level 3 is 150. Okay, I need 50 points to earn the next level. See what that does? You're looking at the next step, and it's just a small thing. 50 points lang yan. Whereas when you're a student, you're in the middle of the term, of the quarter, and you're thinking, okay, this is depressing. I haven't even gotten half of my quizzes. My first long test is just passing. My project is a mess. My essays are this and that. That piles up on a student. That gives them all that stress. But when they see, I just need 50 points, okay? This is just a couple of hours of studying. An improvement in behavior. Also, allow them to track their own points. I have what we call character sheets where I share them with my students. Of course, I have my own records, but I check these character sheets every once in a while to see how many points they've already earned. Okay, and I cross-check them with mine. Okay. By having immediate feedback, I've already earned 150 points. Oh, I have a quiz coming in. Okay, teacher gave me 10 points. So 160. Yes! Diba? They're aware of their standing. Okay? And that in itself, that immediate feedback, gives them more motivation to do more. Okay? It's just like looking at your Shopee app and seeing, oh, okay, I need a few more coins to get a 50% discount. And from that particular statement, you know that I don't do Shopee. Okay, here's a case. Okay, I have what I call a D6 learning system. Okay, it's named after D20, a popular pen and paper role-playing game system. Okay, 4E means 4th edition. I based this particular system on Jenkins multiplayer classroom. My learners are always teamed. They have individual activities, but they also collaborate. They also teach each other. And I give them points for teaching each other. Okay? Each team can collaborate with their with other teams and amongst themselves. Okay? But I also ask them to, okay, who did you learn from? Okay? Or I ask it the opposite. Sir, I learned this particular concept. But this classmate taught me. Could you give him points? That's how we do it in class. Okay. So in my first run of this one, I had 4 modules. The first module was required to be done at first. But after that, the students could choose which modules they wanted to do. I want to do 4 first before 2. Okay, no problem. Okay. I designed the system that way. Learners can also choose their activities and assessments. There are always 3 choices. And we have a tracking system, our character sheets. Now, this is a sample of what we do, okay? The tasks are themed after, again, role-playing games, okay? These are the different activities that you do in a role-playing game. So you have adventures, okay? You have encounters with enemies, okay? We have chance encounters, boss battles, and in parentheses, you'll see the requirement, okay? Rally the troops, okay? You just do a report amongst your teammates, okay? online essay. We call that a boss battle. Okay. And these online essays are actually just chat. We just do them in chat. Okay. No more doc file submissions. Okay. We have plan drafts. We have a final plan. We have a media prototype design. Okay. Everything. And we have what we call a tweet quiz here. A tweet quiz is a quiz where the only question is, what's the most significant thing you learned today? Answer that in 140 characters or less. And yes, I understand that Twitter now has more characters, allows for that, but I'm old school. So 140, it's easy to check. Okay. It improves their communication skills because they're more direct to the point. Suddenly, yung word limits na gusto nila, minimum tayo, 500 words. Tapos, what they do is they just argue in circles. Okay? To teach them not to do that in my class, I ask them to do this. In 140 characters or less, tell me what you learned. Okay? And they do it. Okay? So these are the different activities. These are the different point awards that are given for them. Now, these are the levels that I was talking about. So our perfect grade of 1, okay, is earned when you have 970 experience already. Okay, the next level down, a 125, requires 920. Okay, take a look at the gaps. They're rather small, 50, 40, 50, 60. Okay, easily achievable by a student when you think about it. Okay, and of course, you'll also note that because I'm not really, my computational skills aren't really as sharp as they were, if they were ever sharp. This is the weight. Okay, for a grade of 1 in our grading system in UP, that's a 97% and up. Okay, 92 to 96.99, 88 to 91.99. Okay, so you don't see the weights anymore. They're just points. And your student, for example, I already have a grade of 2, but I want a 1.5. How many points do I need to earn that grade? They can just simply compute. Okay, this many points. Okay, I'll aim for that. Instead of wondering, how many points do I need pa? I have to really do well in this quiz. That's too abstract. This is more direct. Okay, some game design tools. Twine is an interactive story maker. It's available at twinery.org. Okay, now for maybe I'll twinery.org. Okay, you can check that out. It looks like it's programming, and it is, but it's done using regular language and brackets. So you can make branching stories. You are faced with a door. What do? Turn around, open door, cry. The student can choose which option, and then you can branch your story out. That's the usual application of Twine. What you could do is create a story in their heads that's about your lesson. Have problems with lab activities? Twine. Just put in some pictures, okay? You are about to mix these two chemicals. Using stoichiometry compute, how much of each ingredient do you need? And the choices are there. And they choose. If they choose correctly, this happens. The solution turns this way, this color, or becomes hot, or there's smoke coming out. Okay. What happened? Choices. Choose. Exothermic reaction. Okay. In an exothermic reaction, this, explain. Okay. So what would have happened if you added too much of this reagent? Choices. Diba? I'm not saying this will replace your lab, but it's better than nothing. Okay. Next, PowerPoint. Not in the presentation manner. You can make interactive PowerPoints using hyperlinks. That's another lesson. But now that I told you hyperlinks in PowerPoint, interactive PowerPoint, you can search that, and there are a lot of tutorials that can help you devise your own interactive PowerPoints. Of course, video conferencing platforms such as Zoom, Meet, and Teams are also helpful. We use them to make classes, but this time you can use them to hold a game. Okay, sige. Class, ganito mangyayari. Okay, use this twine. First person who finishes messages me. Okay, so sa chat, mauna yung ano, di ba? Yung mauna. Pakikita nyo kung sino nag-message muna. First one in chat gets 20 points. Second in chat gets 18. Suddenly it becomes a competition. But it's also, you can also put in collaborative elements such as if you're a pair, okay, you earn the full 20 points times 2. Okay. It depends on how you craft the game in your head. Okay. And of course, interactive whiteboards such as Jamboard are also helpful for teacher and learner interactions. Okay. If you can't do it this way, you can use your probably Zoom's whiteboard function as well. You can use these to help you illustrate what you need. Okay. And if you're playing a game, sometimes you need those, ano, di ba? You need to draw, you need to type in things. Okay. Yeah, you can use Kahoot and other similar tools as well. But the idea here is you're integrating game thinking into your class. It doesn't matter what tools you have. It matters how you use them. And how you use them is dictated by how well you craft the game in your head. Your lesson is now a game. So here are some suggestions if you use the tools I gave. So you always do this. Think of the mechanics. Think of the different tools that you're going to use for your different game activities. And finally, how to evaluate. Okay, so these are just a couple of examples. So for formative evaluation quizzes, you can use Twine, the choices from earlier. You can actually score that using a rubric. Okay, delivery, you can use it within a learning management system. Your projects, use collaborative documents. So Google Docs, where everything is shared, including shared to you as the teacher, so you can see their progress. And it's also a feature which you may not know. You can actually check in Google Docs who wrote what. It's a lot easier for teamwork, diba? To score objectively how much contribution one member had over the other. Finally, exams. Okay. Now, this is a bit touchy because cheating on exams during this particular setup is easily done. Okay. But with some trust, okay, with some trust building, and of course, if the students feel that everything has been fair for them, they themselves will not cheat. That's one of the findings I had in a study I did in 2012. Okay, that students who feel that they are fairly treated in class, in the activities by the teacher, and all their particular efforts are appropriately rewarded, they will not cheat. They only cheat if they panic because they have to catch up because they're not being scored well or they don't test well. Okay, so that's one of the factors. Build trust, make things feel fair. You're eliminating a lot of the chances that they will cheat already. Of course, we can say 100% they won't cheat, pero at least you're reducing it. Okay. Now, let's summarize everything with this synthesis. Learning in games translates into learning in the real world, especially when your learners grow up with games. This particular cohort of learners actually grew up with video games already. I was born when computer games were considered a fad. Okay, board games were played mostly by adults. I only had snakes and ladders for my own game, where my parents were playing Monopoly and Mahjong. But I witnessed how the technology developed, how these different games on pen and paper and on cards were really prevalent during my formative years. So I also got to play with them. I know the difference of the games from before and the games now. I know what it was like to not have games and have the games now. And what I can say is this: we can live, uh, at least those in my age bracket, we can live without games. Okay, this particular cohort of learners cannot, and that's not a bad thing. It's just like saying for us, it's okay that we don't have newspapers. I still long for something to open up in the morning with my coffee. Diba? But what I do now is just pull up my phone, open my favorite news app. It's not the same. Okay? To ask that our students, to ask that our learners refrain from playing games, is just depriving them of the media that they grew up with. It's part of who they are. So instead of saying games are just play, school is more important, why not bring the both worlds together? Because how do we make things meaningful for them? Diba? How do we make school meaningful for them? It's not just like before that we say, okay, you finish school, you get to college, you graduate, you get a good job. That doesn't happen anymore, especially that there are good jobs where you don't need a college degree. Okay? What will make them finish? Make learning meaningful. Make it important to them. And how do you make it important to them? You make them comfortable with it. How do you make them comfortable with it? Take everything important in their lives and make it part of the learning process. That includes games. So let's end up with this quote. Because I'm a teacher, I always end up with quotes. The worst thing a kid can say about homework is that it's too hard. But the worst thing a kid can say about a game is that it's too easy. Barry Fishman also said that all people are always motivated. They're just not motivated in the things that you want them to do. That's our predicament as teachers. We want them to study, we want them to learn. But as we well know now, it's not something we can force. It has to come from within. And how do we pull that out? How do they motivate themselves? Diba? Sometimes a little fun can be a good part of it. Make learning fun again. And using a game is not necessarily making learning fun, but making a gameful experience makes them feel like there is agency. And as teachers, we also appreciate having agency, that everything we do has a purpose. Let's give that to our learners also. Okay? So, that's it for me. I've been talking for an hour. So, thank you very much. Sir June.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sirs.
Yes, with your talk, I'm sure our participants now have a better understanding or maybe an appreciation of gamification of learning, particularly how gameful learning can be utilized as an alternative approach in the teaching of STEM, and how game thinking can be integrated in their classes. So this time we are going to answer some of the questions that are posted by our attendees in the Q&A box. No? But to save time, we will only answer 2 questions during the session. The first question is from Sir Joel T. Miguel. What are some disadvantages of game-based learning strategy? What are the limitations of gamification strategy? Sir?
Okay. Disadvantages. If you don't, as a teacher, as the person facilitating the game, you have to be very familiar with everything in your design. So I'm guessing this is coming from the idea that there's a parang template game, tapos you're just implementing it. Okay. So that's it. That's the biggest disadvantage. You have to be very familiar with how the game is played, how your players could react, what you do if this situation arises. You have to be prepared for everything. Okay. When you think about it, running a game lesson is just like running a typical lesson. The same materials I prepare when I used to run games of, say, Dungeons and Dragons are the same materials I prepare now. The change was seamless nga eh. From a college student who was refereeing games, I became a teacher who prepared the same materials. I had my own version of a lesson plan. I have a different list of different activities. I have spills for every activity. So you have to be really prepared. Yun, if that's a disadvantage, okay? You have to know your system inside and out, okay? Limitations of gamification, okay? As I said, gamification is a systematic thing, okay? You have to change the entire system. So that takes time and that takes a lot of training kasi it doesn't work kung ako lang yung magaling. Everybody has to have more or less a standard of competency to be able to implement this properly. Okay? So, yun. There is a cultural and thinking paradigm shift involved. We have systems in place that are mostly so distant from what we do in games na you really can't reconcile them immediately. That's why I offered yung gameful learning as something of an in-between. Before we can gamify everything, we have to get a feel of what it's like, diba? So yun, disadvantages. 2, 1, you have to know everything inside and out, okay? And 2, it takes time to change the systems that we have. Pero at the end of the day, Sir Joel, these are just training issues, diba? So yes, they are disadvantages if we are beginners, pero with mastery, if with learning, we become better at it. So yeah, yun siguro, sir.
But Sir John, no? Do you think both game-based learning and gamification demand the same skill set from teachers?
Sir? Pag game-based learning, that's a whole different ball game. Kasi I have to recommend gamer din kayo. Not necessarily computer games, pero you know how to play games. Okay? Sabihin nyo, okay, parang yung usual na pet peeve ko. Sabihin ng teacher, hindi po kasi ako techie. Okay? Sasabihin ko lagi, okay, hindi ka techie, pero you're using the most effective and the most efficient educational technology ever devised by human beings. Alam niyo po kung ano 'yon? Blackboard. That's a technology. Any application of scientific theory and thought, technology. Okay? Same thing with this, sir. Kailangan medyo alam mo kung paano maglaro para so you can implement game-based learning and gamification. Actually, if you play games, it's easier to do gamification than game-based learning. Kasi what we do in game-based learning is we fit the game. We fit learning into the game. Kasi the game teaches Now, sabihin nyo, hindi naman ako gamer, sir. So, hindi na sa akin yan. So, hindi kayo marunong mag-basketball? Hindi kayo marunong mag-chess, volleyball, badminton? All of the things that I've described are more or less my age na tito-tita sports. So, those are games that we play. There are rules. May aesthetics. Diba? May story. Kailangan ko ma-checkmate. Kailangan ko kainin yung king para manalo ako sa chess. Diba? And of course, there's the technology. Saan kayo naglalaro? Sa chessboard. It's made of wood. Technology yun. Okay? So, for us to say na hindi natin kaya, hindi, kaya yan. Okay? Pero ito, sir, to answer your question directly, no? Same level of competencies, it's easier to gamify. It's much easier to be gameful. Okay? Kasi si game-based, you have to know the game. So kung game-based learning tayo, say chess ang gagamitin niyo, more or less chess player na kayo. Kasi alam niyo kung paano isisingit yung lesson. Diba? So yun po.
Okay, I think it's already clear, sir. We will proceed to the second question. Okay, this is from Anonymous. No?
Anonymous attendee.
Yes. How can we implement gamification for those students who don't have technology? Like today, during the pandemic, There are many students who don't own cell phone or other gadgets and depend on the modules from school.
Okay, sir. Sir, ma'am. Okay, hindi natin alam. Thank you, anonymous attendee. You are very well appreciated, anonymous. Okay, ganito. If you noticed kanina, I mentioned a quick type of game na I used to play before. Okay, when I was in high school, I still play from time to time. Pen and paper based role-playing games. Okay. Yun, pwede yun. Okay? If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up Dungeons and Dragons, Shadow, ano nga to? I forgot the other one. Okay? Pero Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, those kinds of games. Okay? You'll see na they're fighting monsters, demons and all. Kalimutan nyo muna yon. Look at the underlying game. Okay? They use pen and paper. They use dice for random generation of say gusto kong tumawid pero my particular player isn't really good at walking kasi medyo may limp siya. So, kailangan natin na random number na, okay, paano ka magiging successful? So, magro-roll ka ng dice, may certain number na you have to achieve para magawa mo yung task. And the story continues. Okay? So, without dice, you can actually do that. Okay? I don't have it now, pero nandun sa aking bookshelf. Okay? I'm assuming na si Anonymous ay more or less my age. Okay? So, pareho pa po tayong bata. Parang yesterday lang tayo gumraduate, di ba? So, yun. If you remember yung Choose Your Own Adventure na game books, where you don't read page 1, page 2, page 3. That's how you usually read a book. Sa isang Choose Your Own Adventure book, you had choices. So, page 1, ito yung kwento. Umuwi ako sa bahay, tapos na-discover ko bukas yung pinto. At the end of the page, sasabihin niya, ano ang gagawin mo? Tapos may choices ka. If you want to open the door, If you want to go inside, turn to page 6. If you want to stay outside, turn to page 2. Tapos naiiba yung kwento. Okay? If you'll notice po, nabanggit ko rin kanina, na yung choice is very important. Even that is gamification already because in a usual lesson, they don't have any choices. Ako yung nagdidikta bilang teacher ko anong matututunan mo ngayon. Bukas ito yung lesson natin. Okay? Next thing that you can do to gamify it is this. Offer nga, marami akong choices ng requirements. Ito, either ito. Pili kayo. Pag ito pinili mo, ito yung grading system na lalabas. Okay? Same pa rin naman yung kalalabasan, same pa rin yung outcome eh. Kasi iba lang yung requirements mo. Pero the mere choices na binigay ninyo, that's already turning it into a game. Kasi they have agency. Yun pa lang, game na siya. Now, let's turn to modules. Kasi nabanggit niyo po, they depend on the modules from school. Why not write modules that are like that? That are game books. Na, okay, if you want to learn more about addition, turn to this page. If you want to skip to multiplication, dito na kayo sa susunod na chapter. Offering those choices, that's a game already. Kasi I'm playing eh. Okay, sinabi niya, ito yung gagawin ko. Okay, ito na. Mas excited ka na kaysa sa yung, okay, 1, 2, 2B, 2C, 2D, I. Ang haba na, tapos linear siya. Okay? So, ayun. Pwedeng ganon. I'm seeing chat din, Sir June, na ino-offer ng ibang participants natin. Yes, we can implement gamification using indigenous materials. I am an expert in doing that. Pen and paper lang, okay na ako magawa ng game. Gaming devices used in learning concepts are proven effective to develop mastery, build teamwork, and critical analysis with students. Yes, okay, that's all in the literature.
Okay.
So, ayun po.
So Sir JP, based on this question, the answer, if I get it right, is that we can actually do gameful learning even without a cell phone or other gadgets. In fact, we can also gamify our modules, right? We can design it the way that is gamified. Okay, thank you,
Masaya
Sir
yun
JP,
actually,
for
sir.
that. Yes.
Sorry. Nagsasalita ako, maliit pala ako. Actually, masaya yun, sir, pag gamify. Kasi I had a textbook on gamification na gamified siya. Na okay, if you want to learn about if you want to learn how to monetize gamification, turn to this chapter. But if you want to learn about how to practice gamification in schools, go to the next one. So ganun din siya eh. So yeah, masaya siya. It's really a fun way of interacting with content.
Okay.
Nababalik-balikan.
So thank you, sir, for answering the questions of the participants and for sharing your expertise and precious time with us in the conference. Now, the UST SEI would like to award the certificate of recognition to you. The certificate reads, Republic of the Philippines, Department of Science and Technology, Science Education Institute, Science Teacher Academy for the Regions. Certificate of recognition is awarded to John Paul Maligalig for his invaluable contribution as plenary speaker at the second DUST SEI Project Star International Conference with the theme Innovations, Challenges, in Transformations in STEM Education, Moving Forward in a Post-Pandemic World, held from November 16 to 18, 2021, signed by the DUST SEI Director, Dr. Josette T. Biu.
Yay.
Once again, thank you very much, Sir JP.
Thank you po.
And
Thank you,
yes, let us
Director.
not forget.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, let us not forget the call of the speaker to restore the fun in learning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir Bern?
Hello. Thank you so much. At this point, let's have a health break for 15 minutes. You may also visit the exhibits while having health break.
That is where the brightest stars. Some say at the farthest ends of the earth. That is where the brightest stars of the night sky are born. And it is the mission of Science Teacher Academy for the Regions to seek these bright stars, fuel innovation, and recognize their star power. Balogo Elementary School, one of the last mile schools in the country. Now, an oasis of learning. But the journey was never easy.
I grew up from a typical barangay community where life is truly challenging.
It is in this environment that Mr. Epigenio Cagas Pagar and Mrs. Paz Francis Pagar established the school.
He used the Sitio Chapel first as their first classroom. Later, he availed his GSIS and Pag-ibig loan to purchase this lot to be used as the school site. So eventually, this campus emerged with only one classroom used for grade 1 and grade 2. Kaawa-awa talaga ang sitwasyon. Even the classroom don't have, literally not conducive to learning.
When Mrs. Pagar retired, her son-in-law, Rex, took the helm. together with the daughters of the founders.
Starting 2007, we captured the three essential aspects, which is now not just focus on quality, but we give emphasis also to access and governance. Since then, we bravely implement innovations, particularly on our advocacy on literacy.
Through Science Teacher Academy for the Regions, a program of the DOST Science Education Institute that boosts the capability of teachers to deliver quality science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education throughout the regions of the country. He was empowered to lead the transformation of the school and its teaching practices, innovating by creating an active and supportive learning environment where students are fully engaged and are taught values and skills critical to facing the multifaceted challenges of the modern world. Ideas that go beyond the four walls of the classroom, across the community, and throughout the country.
Project STAR continually refueled our expertise.
Together with his fellow teachers, they emphasized first-hand experience and creating a lasting impact on students.
We were able to raise children with minds who are responding to the challenges that's happening around them. They are aware of their roles, particularly on how they could participate in nation building, in addressing regional or global issues, in the issue of environmental problems. The children are already leading with their fellows on tree growing, waste segregation, waste disposal, and processing activities.
But it was never a lone effort.
The entire biosphere of Balogo Elementary School composed of a range of key players starting from the children as well as entrepreneurs, corporations, non-government organizations, local government units, national line agencies, universities. We already involved the community, barangay council. We invited our fellows, Baloguhanons, living outside the country to help us. So each of them supports our school. So because we've done it right, we were able to create a diversified pool of resources.
Together, they established projects like the STAR Teaching Learning Studio, a classroom-turned-laboratory, science and math library, and ICT center in one. All these efforts led to tremendous success.
Our school is already a zero non-reader school. Ibig sabihin, lahat ng aming mag-aaral, grade 1 to grade 6, marunong silang lahat bumasa. As to achievement, 2014 to 2017, number 1 kami sa NAT result in the whole Bukidnon. As to competitions, we always took lead in everything, particularly in the Metrobank Mathematics Challenge. As you could see now, it is totally 360 degrees different. From less than 30 kids enjoying the access for quality education to now close to 200 children.
Transforming Balogo Elementary School to Wow Balogo Elementary School.
Wow is our tagline, which signifies celebration of good teaching and loving education.
Mr. Rex Sario, Balogo Elementary School, Bukidnon, Region 10.
I stand by the tagline of the UST, Science for the People. As teachers at the basic level of education, we have the highest influence to Filipino children for them to love science and mathematics. After the awards, more support is coming in to my school. I have now local university partners, regional university partners, and national university partners. Aside from that, I gained acquaintances from other experts in the field of science and mathematics. Kung dati, nakakasulisit kami, 1,000, mahihirapan na kami. After my award, 5,000, 20,000, 50,000, di na yun ganon kahirap hingin pag si Bright Star ang nagsolicit.
And to address physical access, they improved the road that connects the community to the school. Once a long, rough, and muddy path that prevented students from coming to class during rainy days. With Mr. Sario's personal funds and the help of DOST SEI Director Dr. Josette Bio, who gathered generous donors, a 3.2 million peso concrete road was constructed, eventually named in her honor.
So after that, rain or shine, the attendance rate remains 90% above.
What makes Balogo Elementary School different from other schools is that it is really a community of learners where teachers and parents work together to nurture the pupils. I was very inspired and at the same time amazed to see that teachers implement the learning methodologies that they have learned in the workshops conducted by the Science Education Institute.
This is simply the beginning, as Balogo Elementary School continues to pursue teaching excellence for educators.
We don't just adopt the DOST SEI Project STAR, but we owned it. So from STAR, we name it now STOP, or the Science Teacher Academy of Pakantukan, where we also do a lot of capacity building, not just for our school, but we are already helping teachers outside our school, helping my fellow teachers succeed by improving their teaching practice is a way of helping my country already.
And students.
Industry 4.0 needs human resources who were technologically driven, intelligently intensified, and creative, above all, problem solvers individuals. And that skills requires state-of-the-art, technologically backed, active learning environment, which a 21st century classroom could offer. So hopefully, very soon, we have our own 21st century classroom.
From methods to resources to access, they believe it is about holistically paving the way for a community of learners that are passionate about lifelong learning.
Continue making our science and mathematics lesson attractive and appealing to our school children. The more Filipino children who love science and mathematics, the more future science and technology human resources for our country.
Balogo Elementary School is a symbol of hope. It simply shows to us that even if a school is located in a far-flung and isolated area, it can still provide world-class education to students.
As a Bright Star National Awardee, I want to inspire my fellow Filipino teachers. As a teacher, we do make a difference. We do change lives. We transform individuals. May that inspire us a lot and keeps us motivated to teach at our very best. And that is the ultimate goal, that in a little way, this Sitio Village could contribute in the future.
Wow, Balogo Elementary School, a bright star. Thanks to teachers inspired to innovate. Science Teacher Academy for the Regions. STAR.
Let us now advance to plenary 7 on the topic From High Touch to High Tech, How the Smithsonian Promotes Digital Equity in STEAM Education. To moderate the last session, I now turn over the virtual floor to Dr. Robel Salcedo.
Thank you, Sir Bernie. Is my audio okay?
Yes, you're loud and clear, Ma'am Robel.
Hello, everyone. I am Robel Salcedo from DepEd Regional Office 6, Western Visayas. I am your moderator for this last plenary session. Our last plenary speaker, but definitely not the least, is Dr. Carol O'Donnell. Dr. Carol O'Donnell is a senior executive and director of the Smithsonian Science Education Center, an organization of the Smithsonian Institution dedicated to transforming K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. In her role at the Smithsonian Institution, which is a nonprofit and quasi-governmental status, Carol serves as the U.S. representative on the Global Council of the Inter-Academic Partnership Science Education Program, an appointment by the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And she serves on the UN Broadband Commission Working Group on School Connectivity, Hybrid Learning. Carol also represents the Smithsonian on the Subcommittee on U.S. Federal Coordination in STEM Education, which advises and assists the Committee on STEM Education of the Office of the Science and Technology Policy of the Executive Office of the President of the United States. She works in collaboration with the Siemens Stiftung and the House Diaklinin Focia Foundation to develop the field of STEM education internationally. In her role on the Program Committee for the International Dialogue on STEM Education, Carol co-authored the position paper on Using Science to Do Social Good, STEM Education for Sustainable Development. Prior to joining the Smithsonian, Carol was a group leader at the U.S. Department of Education, supporting states and districts' implementation of ESEA, or the Elementary and Secondary Education Act programs. She also oversaw the Cognition and Student Learning Research Grant Program of the Institute of Education Sciences. A former K-12 teacher and curriculum developer, Dr. O'Donnell is still in the classroom today, serving on the part-time faculty of the Physics Department at the George Washington University, where she earned her doctorate. Her TEDx talk demonstrates her passion for integrating digital and physical interactions in science classrooms. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Carol O'Donnell. Ma'am?
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you today. It's evening for me, and I understand morning for you, or beginning of the afternoon. So thank you for inviting me to join you. I'm going to share my screen, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, ma'am, please.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my slides? All right, so first of all, as our moderator mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you today about From High Touch to High Tech, How the Smithsonian Promotes Digital Equity in STEM Education. This is important to me. I was asked to give a TED Talk a couple of years ago, and I chose the theme of the TED conference was around metamorphosis. And they asked me to talk about how science education has changed over the years. And as we know, science education has now become STEM education, where we have this true integration of science and technology, engineering, math, and now, of course, the important role that the arts play, STEAM. And when I gave the talk, I talked about how we shifted from teaching science by telling students scientific facts to engaging in physical hands-on science learning in the 1980s and 90s. And then today being much more focused on this truly interdisciplinary integration of science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math, so that we could integrate technology into our teaching. And in the TED Talk, one of the things that I talked about was that as we emerge into a much more digital world, as we sit here in this virtual conference, learning from one another, I wanted to make certain that we didn't lose the important role that high touch, low tech, hands-on environments play in helping to promote students' understanding of science, technology, engineering, and math, and the arts. So today what I'm going to talk about is what we call the tech spectrum, making certain that we move students from high touch to high tech environments in order to make certain that they have the digital literacy that's necessary, but that we don't ignore the fact that many of our youth still do not have access to digital tools and broadband access. And as a result, we have to make certain that we are teaching them digital literacy, computational thinking, digital proficiency, even if they're in environments in which they may not have access to digital tools. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. And as we mentioned, we're going to be focusing on this incredibly important role of us being in this increasingly high-tech world. And as we've learned from the recent pandemic, you may have heard of the term digital divide, which I'll talk about a little bit later as I define it, which is in essence this gap that exists between those who have technology and those who don't. That's why I serve on the UN Broadband Commission for School Connectivity's working group on digital learning, so that we can make certain that we are addressing the digital divide, which is making sure that all students have access to these devices and that they have access to broadband. But while we wait for students to have access to these digital tools, that we make sure that we're still developing their computational thinking and digital fluency. And so today what I'm going to be addressing is that we know that 1.5 billion children in the world who are ages 3 to 17, that they still don't have access to the internet in their homes. And yet we know that digital literacy is crucial. So today what I'm going to talk to you about is how can you develop students' digital literacy, digital fluency, digital proficiency, their computational thinking, even when they may not have access to broadband or digital tools. And the way that I'm going to do that is by talking specifically about one example of how you might integrate computational thinking into the classroom. So here's what I'm going to do. First, talk to you a little bit about who I work for. I work for the Smithsonian and I direct the Smithsonian Science Education Center. So I just want you to know fundamentally who is the Smithsonian Science Education Center. Next, I'm going to talk specifically about what problem we're facing today as it relates to the digital divide and how are we going about solving it. Third, I'm going to show you what I believe is a good example of what STEAM curriculum could look like, where you move students from high touch, low tech environments to high tech environments. And then finally, I want to share with you specifically what is computational thinking, and are there ways that you might be able to integrate computational thinking in a high touch environment into your STEM classroom so that students can develop digital fluency. And then I'll end by just sharing with you a little bit of research that shows that this actually does work. It does make a difference in student learning. So a little bit about the Smithsonian Science Education Center, which I direct. So the Smithsonian, and I always like to ask this question, if you have ever heard of the Smithsonian, if you've ever been to the Smithsonian, maybe there's a way you can show me either in the chat or in some type of response, but I always love to go to these events to hear from others who might have been able to either visit the Smithsonian or you've experienced the Smithsonian virtually or online. The Smithsonian is the world's largest museum, education, and research complex. We have 19 museums, 9 research centers, 5 education centers, a zoo, and 154 million objects in our collection. So you can understand why touching objects, physical objects, engaging in high touch learning makes a difference to the Smithsonian. Now, at the heart of our work is this idea that experiential learning matters. So many of you in the talks that you've even heard today and yesterday and the day before have to do with this idea that STEM education often is highly interactive, highly experiential, and the Smithsonian believes deeply in that. And so our center was formed in 1985 at the Smithsonian in order to promote high-touch experiential learning with youth in their STEM classrooms. We were founded jointly by the US National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And today I work across the globe with what's called the Inter-Academy Partnership. So 143 countries who are committed to sciences, engineering, and medicine, and making certain that we can promote science education with youth. Now, our organization works specifically to promote active inquiry-based STEM teaching learning in grades K through 12 or primary and secondary schools. Our mission, transforming K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. You know, we don't really think about science classes as only learning science anymore. The acronym STEAM is a good demonstration of that. That we no longer are teaching science, we are using science as a hook to engage students in the disciplines of science, technology, engineering, and math, and making certain that learning is interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. So there are 3 goals at our center. The first is, as you see in the pictures that I'm showing you of youth, we want to engage and promote active inquiry-based K-12 STEM teaching and learning. We also try to advance K-12 STEM education for sustainable development. The important role that the UN Sustainable Development Goals play in STEM teaching is part of my work globally. And then also ensuring diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion in STEM education, making certain that all youth see STEM as accessible to them. Now, we achieve our goals by developing high-touch curricular resources, but we also develop high-tech digital resources. And we certainly promote professional development for teachers and leadership development for school districts, ministries of education across the globe. Now, for this particular talk, I'm going to be talking specifically about one problem. And that problem is, how do we integrate high-tech digital literacy into a classroom in which the students may not have access to broadband or the digital devices that are necessary in order to learn those advanced skills? So this talk is really focused on promoting digital equity, which means getting rid of the digital divide. Now, the digital divide is basically this inequitable access that exists between those who have access to physical devices and broadband and those who don't. Now, the World Bank data has shown that nearly 40% of the world is still offline as of 2021, 40%. And in the Philippines, 53%. So how do you educate youth on the digital skills that are necessary for the 21st century, for their future workforce, when they may not have access to broadband? So out of 7.7 billion people on Earth, only 4 billion have access to the internet. 65% do have access to a mobile phone. And so that is important. There's a difference between having access to a computer with high broadband internet access and having access to a phone. There are many things that we can do with youth in which we're using the phone as a digital tool. Now, in the US, where I live, nearly 100% of students who are the richest or in the top quartile of socioeconomic status have access to a computer at home. And yet, if you look at the number of students in the bottom quartile of socioeconomic status, those students who are the poorest in the US, only 82% of them have access to a computer at home. 82% is a high percentage relative to other countries. But it's still, 82% is still below the OECD average. So we know that the better educated and the better connected, that those students are the ones who benefit the most from the digital revolution, which means that the students who are not well connected are being left behind. And that's what we mean by this term, the digital divide. Now, there are a lot of terms out there. And the question is, what do they all mean? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between the digital divide. What do we mean by digital proficiency? What do we mean by digital literacy? And even, I'll throw one other term in there, digital fluency. So first, the digital divide. The digital divide are those disparities that exist in access to actually having access to physical devices. I don't have access to a mobile phone. I don't have access to a computer. I don't have access to broadband. When there is a disparity in the number of students who have access to physical devices and those students who are more advantaged, who do have access to physical devices, that's considered to be the digital divide. And we are trying to close that divide and achieve digital equity. The second definition is the term digital proficiency. So how is that different than the digital divide? Digital proficiency is what people can do when they use computers and other digital tools. So the first one, the digital divide, that's when you just don't have access to the physical tools or broadband, and the disparity that exists between people who have it and people who don't. The digital proficiency means, what do you have the proficiency to use these computers when you're given access to them, or to use other digital tools? The third term that's important in this talk is digital literacy. Digital literacy is using technology to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information with others. In other words, it's the responsible use of technology. So digital divide, access to the technology, the physical items. Digital proficiency, knowing how to use them. And digital literacy, the responsible use of technology. Now, unfortunately, we haven't obtained digital equity. We know that 100% of students don't have access to digital devices or to broadband. And so this talk, I'm going to show you how you can help develop students' digital fluency, digital proficiency, digital literacy, computational thinking, even though they may not have access to those devices. And I also want to just share this graphic with you, which also shows that there are some things you should think about. Digital proficiency is this: can I demonstrate the skills of using technology tools? Digital literacy, can I apply these skills effectively in the way that I demonstrate my understanding of how to become a digital citizen? So that's your understanding. And then finally, digital fluency, a new term, which is that you're using those digital tools and you're able to use them respectfully. You don't, you make certain that students are feeling safe in a digital world. You don't misuse your digital tools in an unethical way. Now, in this talk, I'm also going to speak about computational thinking. We're starting to see more and more of an integration of computational thinking into the STEM classroom. So what do we mean by computational thinking? That's defined as the thought processes of formulating problems and potential solutions in a way that the solution can be effectively carried out by any information processing agent, which means by a human or by a computer or by a combination of humans and computers. So when we're trying to develop students' digital fluency, or digital literacy, we can develop their computational thinking skills even if we don't have access to computer devices. So the graphic on the right shows you that computational thinking is made up of different proficiencies. For example, pattern recognition. From a very young age, we give students, and even in kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, we give students the opportunity to recognize patterns. As they get older, those patterns then become and help them understand how to analyze data. A second proficiency of computational thinking is decomposition, being able to take a complex problem and break it down and into its respective parts. Now, as I read each of these as I read each of these competencies of computational thinking to you, think about your STEM classroom. In your STEM classroom, have you ever engaged students in problem solving and problem identifying? Have you ever engaged your students in pattern recognition or breaking a problem down into its component parts? Each of these proficiencies of computational thinking are things that you'll find in a typical STEM classroom. Abstraction is where you're removing all those unnecessary details and you're focusing specifically on the important data. Algorithms, where you're creating a series of basically steps in order to solve a problem. Modeling and simulation, where you're taking something and you're creating a model or you're simulating a scientific phenomenon. Again, very common terms that we see and skills that we see STEM teachers engaging in. Well, these are the fundamental parts of computational thinking. And so the question is, how can you embed these proficiencies of computational thinking into your STEM classroom? So my question is that I hope to address is, can you promote digital equity, which means you're getting rid of the digital divide? Can you promote digital equity by developing students' computational thinking skills, despite the fact that they don't have access to computers, they don't have access to technological devices, and you are trying to develop their digital literacy? And I think the answer is yes. Now, the PISA has shown us that high touch learning actually matters. That on average, in the past 10 years, there's actually been no appreciable improvement in student achievement in reading, math, or science, according to the PISA, just in those countries where they've invested heavily in information and communication technologies for education. So even though many countries are investing deeply in providing technological tools to students, the PISA is showing that those students are really no better off in their math, reading, or science, despite access to those tools. For example, in Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, every single 15-year-old had access to its own individual computer at schools. And yet in Germany, Italy, and Japan, there was only one school computer for every 4 students. In some countries, no access to computers. So what this OECD report showed from PISA was that it's important to maintain a baseline level of inquiry-based, experiential, high-touch learning and high quality pedagogy, high quality teaching, and that alone will do more to create equity in a digital world than can be achieved by expanding the high-tech resources and devices in those classrooms. If you are going to give schools high-tech devices, it has to be accompanied by high-quality pedagogy and giving students the opportunity to engage in those skills that I just showed you in a high-touch way. Combining the two, high touch with high tech, makes a difference. So if you are interested in this data from this OECD report, this was published in 2015. And this report shows you making the connection matters, but providing high-touch experiential inquiry-based learning makes a greater difference. So I call this the high-touch to high-tech spectrum. The field refers to it as that. And a lot of research has been done on the differences between what are referred to as unplugged, high-touch environments. You see these students on the left. They are not using a computer, but they are engaging in problem solving, pattern recognition, those fundamental skills that are needed for the future technology skill sets. In the middle is an example of not an unplugged environment, but a plugged environment. Again, back to this idea of using a mobile device. This is probably what we would consider to be not low tech, like a high touch, no computers, but medium tech. Doesn't require necessarily a high bandwidth for broadband, but you can do a lot with a mobile device. And then finally, another example of a plugged environment is this computer I'm using right now. High-tech, computer-based resources. The hypothesis our center is putting out is that in order to really advance students' computational thinking and digital fluency, digital literacy, we want to move them from a high-touch environment to a high-tech environment. So I'm going to show you an example of what I mean by taking something and moving students in a STEM classroom from high-touch to high-tech. Now think about this. Up until now, I haven't referred to STEM classrooms specifically, but I'm going to show you an example of what a STEM classroom might look like, where students are engaged in a high-touch to high-tech experience. So this is an example from a curricular program called Smithsonian Science for the Classroom. This particular module is called How Can We Provide Fresh Water to Those in Need? And the idea is to move students from a high-touch, hands-on environment to a high-tech environment in which they're integrating science, technology, engineering, and math, and the arts, so that students can, in this case, engineer a solution to a real-world problem, which is accessing fresh water. And you can see the image of the module here. Now, this particular module or curriculum starts off by giving students just a scientific phenomenon. So this is a fairly low-tech resource. You could either give them a physical picture of this scientific phenomenon, you can show them a video of the scientific phenomenon, or you might engage them even in a some type of a digital simulation of this particular phenomenon. So let's look at it from a very low tech, just a physical picture. I can actually say to students, what are some of the things that you observe in this particular scientific phenomenon? What do you observe? What do you notice? What do you wonder? Students would begin to understand this particular scientific phenomenon by just saying, oh, I noticed that there's water, the water seems to be moving, the water seems to be going into a hole. I'm not sure where the water's going. So they now start to also wonder, it looks like the water might be disappearing. Where's the water going? Is the water going underground? If it's going underground, how do I access it? So this engagement with scientific phenomenon could be done in a very low tech way. Then you might start to drive students thinking about the phenomenon, getting them to ask questions. Where did the water come from? Where's the water going? Oh, how have humans impacted the water that we need? And how do we solve this problem of getting this fresh water from underground to the surface so we can use it to drink? And what if people don't have enough access to fresh water? How do we provide that fresh water to people who need it? So far, fairly low tech. Photographs, images, text that might teach them about aquifers. Even students can now also engage in learning about this topic by integrating science, the understanding of aquifers and groundwater, with technology, simple physical technology like a three-way valve or a system or model that they're going to build. That's a form of technology and a high-touch environment. And the students might be asked, how could you develop a model to engineer a solution to a problem to move water from where it is on the ground to where you need it on the table? And so students begin to use their engineering skills to solve this problem, to use high-touch technological tools to model the movement of groundwater. Well, so far, nothing high-tech. They're using low-tech tools to solve problems, and solving problems is part of this idea of computational thinking, digital fluency. So students would then record their ideas, simple piece of paper, again, very low tech, high touch environment in which they're testing their models, fixing something that doesn't work. So maybe their three-way valve breaks and they fix it. Again, these are the same types of processes that people who might become computer scientists later on begin to engage in, but these are very young students. From a very young age, we're building their computational thinking, their problem-solving skills, their pattern recognition, and their use of low-tech technology. Students might also use tools to be able to study patterns. So in this case, they might do testing on their water that's been contaminated to understand the pH level or the salinity of the water. And the tools are simple, high-touch tools. They use a pH paper, they dip it into their contaminated water, they put that paper, that pH paper against, for example, the grid that you see in front of them. They might be looking for the nitrates in the water. All low-tech resources, but engaged in pattern recognition to see what the sampling color might be. And this helps them to better understand, is their water contaminated? What could they do to their water to clean it, to purify it? The students then, as they begin to develop their skills in this high-touch environment, now start to shift their thinking to a high-tech environment. So in this case, students are now transitioning to a digital simulation in which they're moving from studying a scientific phenomenon on a small scale within their classroom to now studying it in a modeled large global setting that they cannot model easily in their classroom. And so now they use digital tools to study something that might be too small, too complex, too far away, too big for them to be able to study directly in their classroom. So in this case, students now shift their attention to this high-tech tool, this simulation called Equation, the freshwater access game, in which students have to manage the world's water and wealth to make sure that everyone on Earth has enough fresh water to meet their needs. And the way that the students win the game is they redistribute Earth's fresh water in this digital simulation so that every region has the amount of water that they need. And again, students might also read to learn more information to better understand the consequences of diverting freshwater resources from where it is say through using a tool like irrigation to where they need it. And in this case, they read about the Aral Sea. And so they're integrating the arts, language arts, literacy into the learning of science. So that particular example took students from this high touch environment to this high tech environment. And now the question is, how can we understand what skills they've learned explicitly in this movement from high touch to high tech? So earlier I mentioned to you about this idea of computational thinking. So I want to reflect on the examples that I just gave you and go back to those proficiencies of computational thinking. So if you think about that example, students were engaged in pattern recognition, where they might be looking at examples of different types of freshwater access, or when they were using their nitrate paper, they might be looking at the patterns of colors to see whether the water that's been contaminated is demonstrating certain contamination or contaminants because of the patterns that they're seeing in their table. Students were also modeling moving fresh water from where it is to where they need it by moving and building this groundwater to surface water model, physical model in their classroom. They were evaluating whether their model that they built actually worked. Was it effective? They were breaking their engineering system down into component parts. They had tubing and they had a valve. And so they're trying to see if their system is working when they move these different parts together. And fundamentally, these skills, these computational skills, can be developed in this very high touch environment, very low tech environment, that will help students, again, develop these proficiencies over time. So again, computational thinking doesn't need to just be developed in a high tech environment. It can be developed in a high touch environment in which we're using the human processing agent, the brain, perhaps in combination with digital simulations, but to help students develop their computational thinking skills. Now, this resource is free. Smithsonian Science for Makerspaces, the freshwater equation game that I just shared with you. All of these resources are free from the Smithsonian. This particular Smithsonian Science for Makerspaces integrates science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as art, in order for students to develop their computational thinking skills in high touch, low tech environments. In this case, students are using computational thinking and systems models to obtain data, to uncover patterns, like you see here, that are related to characteristics of how different characteristics of an animal can influence the animal's success in environment. So how can we make sure the animal can survive? And what we're doing in this trait tracker is we're using these very physical, high touch experiences that are very low cost, that students can study and build their skills around algorithms. So for example, students first make some observations of these little baby bunnies. They think about how the bunnies are the same, how are the bunnies different? And even though these animals are all the same species, they might have different traits. For example, different body size, different fur color. And sometimes that special trait can help the animal be more successful in an environment. So if you take that dark black bunny that's on the far left and you put him into a dark black soil environment, he might be able to better survive in that environment than the bunny on the far right side, who's orange and brighter colored. So what these students do is they think about traits and how traits can help an animal eat foods better, or how they can help them hide from their predators. And they apply that same topic to the wood mouse. Like the wood mouse has this dark coat and it lives in the forest floor. And they use this information about the wood mouse. So they first observe it in the rabbits, then they apply it to a mouse. And they begin to now look at certain algorithms to be able to determine whether or not that mouse could actually survive. So in a physical, high-touch environment, students are actually studying the skills of algorithms. So students have this example of what an algorithm is, which is just this step-by-step process that a computer or a human uses to solve a problem. Students work through a physical simulation and they begin to take turns. They start to record how many berries can the baby mouse eat. And then the teams begin to think about whether their mouse will die or whether their mouse will survive based on the number of berries that the mouse is able to collect. And again, what students are doing is they're looking at different patterns. They're using a particular algorithm or a step-by-step process for being able to solve this problem of helping that mouse survive in its environment. In addition, to move students into a truly high-tech environment, you might also get students to be able to code. So we've just taught them different algorithms, and now we might take that skill and get them to think about coding or developing or designing their own game. And in this case, this is the food chain fix. Again, all of this is free. Students explore the roles of different organisms in a food chain. So there's the science, while demonstrating their knowledge of how to design a model in a game-like simulation. So they're actually creating their own digital game, and they're using the free program, the free programming language called Scratch, which you can download for free. And we've created the software that students could use to design and build and code their own digital game. Now again, I just want to go through this. They are starting off in a high touch environment, physically manipulating pieces in which they're learning about algorithms and step-by-step processes to solve a problem, to protect a mouse from its environment, within its environment. And then they're slowly moving into this more high-tech plugged environment, where now they're starting to apply those skills, those computational thinking skills they learned in the high-touch environment to a high-tech coding environment. And then they basically, over a week's time, develop their own digital game that's using their scientific understanding, their engineering skills, and their technological tools and mathematical skills, and their art skills. So these students actually designed this background themselves to be able to design and develop their own game, a truly transdisciplinary experience. Now, just to kind of summarize this, what we're trying to do is we're just basically saying that you can address the digital divide, which is when students don't have access to physical devices. That because this digital divide does exist, that it is really important to be able to say that you can still teach students these incredibly important computational thinking, digital literacy skills in a high-touch, low-tech environment. And that even if you have access to broadband and you have access to the internet and you have access to high-tech tools, that I still encourage you to please promote the learning of those basic computational thinking skills to develop students' digital literacy. Please still engage students in this low-tech, high-touch environment before engaging them in this high-tech environment. Don't dive right in, even if you have access to the tools. So here's a summary. There is emerging research that shows that unplugged, high-touch computational thinking exercises like the one that I shared with you that can better prepare students to engage with digital, high-tech, plugged counterparts. So, again, better to start them off in this high-touch environment as you prepare for them to move into this high-tech environment. That the research shows that there is similar effectiveness to the training on a digital device. So if I just gave you a digital device only versus if I started you off in a high-touch environment, that similar effectiveness, and that the impact on younger students' self-efficacy in programming, their belief that they can engage in programming, they can be a computer coder, they can engage in 21st century skills, that when we do this with young students, they develop a higher efficacy when we move them from high-touch environments to high-tech ones. And then finally, using a high-touch to high-tech pedagogy, which integrates STEM and the arts and computational thinking, that students can learn these STEM skills and develop digital literacy, even without access to computers and high-tech devices. Now, we have tried to study this to see whether it actually does work. And when you engage students in a high-touch environment and move them into this high-tech experience, that students were able to apply what they had learned to solving real-world science problems compared to the comparison condition that didn't. So these were randomly assigned conditions. That students in underserved classrooms actually scored higher on their science performance compared to students who did not have access to this high-touch to high-tech environment. And finally, that this high-touch to high-tech approach to teaching science actually does make a difference in students' not only science scores, but their reading and math scores as well. So my email is here. I'll take questions. I believe deeply in this important role of moving students from high touch to high tech, but I especially believe that students who don't have access to high touch, high tech devices can learn computational thinking skills and can be prepared for future computer science, future work jobs.
Thank
So
you
I'll
very
stop
much.
there and see if there are any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Carol, for the excellent presentation and for sharing relevant and meaningful Smithsonian ideas. This valuable learning experience gave us useful information and open our minds how to implement science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics education in our schools using high-touch strategies and environment in order to prepare our students into a high-tech approaches and strategies, and as well in the process creating digital equity environment among our learners. So let us see the questions coming from our participants. LJ, can you flash it? Okay, let's have one from Jason Arbaez. From Smithsonian's standpoint, is digital literacy prerequisite to digital equity? Dr. Carol?
I mean, I would say absolutely. I mean, digital equity, if you think of it as the counterpart to the digital divide, that is really only referring to the access to physical devices. And that digital literacy means your ability to use technological tools. And I do believe that in order to achieve digital equity, we need to develop students' digital literacy, but we also need to make certain that they have access to the technological tools that, of course, that are necessary to them, but they also need access to the skills, the underlying skills, like, for example, computational thinking, that allow them to think as a problem solver, as I showed. And that, yes, will absolutely help to develop, when we develop their digital literacy, we reduce the digital divide and we promote digital equity.
Thank you for that. Shall we have another question? See if we can enter into questions for the interest of time, Dr. Carol. So we have another one. Do we have another question?
Yeah, there seems to be one from Gary.
Okay.
Do
I
you-
cannot see. Can you see it from your end, Dr. Carol?
Yes, it says, what are the best ways to implement high-touch instructions for learners who are in offline mode with no online access at all? So one of the reasons why we created the Smithsonian Science for Makerspaces program, which is free, is that for those educators who can print out the instructions, for example, for developing algorithmic thinking, that would allow you to be able to provide that printed resource to your students. They're literally physically cutting objects out and arranging them in certain patterns, building their skills around algorithmic thinking, but they don't have access to anything online. Now, clearly, because it's on our website, it's free, you need to go to it to print it out. So somebody, the educator, needs to have access to the computer. Now, if you're teaching, though, in a virtual environment, that's assuming, of course, that students would have access to online. But we're assuming that students are either in a classroom or even in their homes, where we would print these things out and send that, if you're in a virtual environment, send those packets home to students where they would engage firsthand.
Thank you for that, Dr. Carol. So because of we have limited time, all other questions will be sent to you. You can send it to your email as you have posted it a while ago. So, and to show our utmost appreciation, that we are going to award you the certificate of recognition.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let me read it. Okay, I have the LJ, please. For LG, could you flash the certificate of recognition so that we could, okay. Republic of the Philippines, Department of Science and Technology, Science Education Institute, Science Teacher Academy for the Regions awards the certificate of recognition to Dr. Carol O'Donnell for her invaluable contribution as plenary speaker at the second DOST-SEI Project STAR International Conference with the theme Innovations, Challenges, and Transformations in STEM Education Moving Forward in a Post-Pandemic World, held from November 16 to 18, 2021. Signed, Giuseppe PBU, Director, the OST-SEI. Dr. Carol, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your precious time and expertise with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sir Burns?
Yes, Ma'am Ravel.
Okay, take the floor, please.
All right. The last part of the program is called Ideas or Interactive Discussion among Educators and Specialists. In this portion, participants will be grouped by regions as follows. For Group 1, we have CAR, Region 1, and Region 2. Again, for Group 1, CAR, Region 1, and Region 2. For Group 2, we have Regions 3, 4A, and 4B. Again, for Group 2, we have Regions 3, 4A, and 4B. For Group 3, we have NCR and Region 5. Again, Group 3, Region 5, and NCR. For Group 4, we have Regions 6, 7, and 8. Again, Group 4, Regions 6, 7, and 8. Group 5, we have Regions 9, 10, and 11. Again, Group 5, we have Regions 9, 10, and 11. For Group 6, we have Region 12, Caraga, and BARM. Again, Group 6, Region 12, Caraga, and BARM. After leaving this meeting, you may proceed to your respective room in the auditorium by clicking the join button. You may now proceed to your respective rooms.
Again.